On my 36th birthday, I sat alone in a café with a cupcake, a single candle, and the kind of silence that makes your chest hurt. The waitress, bless her heart, saw me staring at the tiny flame and whispered, "Make a wish." I didn't tell her that my only wish was that, just once in my life, someone would remember me without needing something in return. That was 12 years ago. Now my name is on Forbes, my company's valued at $75 million, and my parents, who used to forget my birthday for 20 years straight, just showed up with cake, flowers, and a business proposal. But before we get there, let me tell you how I got here. I grew up in a small town in Indiana, in a house that looked perfect from the outside. White picket fence, freshly mowed lawn, my dad's truck parked neatly in the driveway. But inside, it was like living with ghosts that shouted instead of haunting quietly. My parents weren't cruel, at least not in the way that leaves bruises you can show a teacher. Their cruelty was quieter. It was the kind that chipped away at you slowly, dismissed dreams, ignored birthdays, mocking every attempt I made to be seen. I was the middle child, which in my house meant invisible. My older brother, Ryan, was the golden boy, varsity everything, smooth talker, the kind of guy my dad bragged about at every barbecue. My younger sister, Chloe, was the baby princess who could do no wrong. And me? I was the practical one. The one who didn't need much. The one they assumed would always be fine. When I was 14, I built my first website for a local florist who couldn't afford real marketing. She paid me $50 and a box of old candles she was going to throw out. I remember running home with that cash, so proud of myself I could have burst. My dad looked up from his beer and said, $50? That's cute. Maybe one day you'll make real money. That was the moment I decided I'd prove him wrong. I didn't go to college. I couldn't afford it, and no one offered to help. I worked at a diner by day, coded websites by night, and watched as my family's attention orbited around everyone but me. Birthdays came and went, no cards, no calls, not even a text. When I turned 20, I baked myself a cupcake. When I turned 21, I worked a double shift and treated myself to a $6 cocktail. When I turned 25, I stopped celebrating altogether. That year, though, I built my first real client site, a small boutique clothing line that ended up going viral after a local influencer wore one of their dresses. Orders poured in, and the owner called me crying, thanking me for saving her business. That night, I realized something: people could ignore me, dismiss me, mock me, but they couldn't erase what I built. So I started building more. By 27, I registered my first company, Luna Digital, named after my dog, the only living thing that had never let me down. It started in my one-bedroom apartment with a second-hand laptop and a dream that didn't fit in that cramped space. The business grew faster than I did. I worked 14-hour days, sleeping on my couch, surviving on instant noodles and caffeine. Clients loved me because I delivered more than I promised. I learned to write code, design, market, pitch, everything. Alone. The only thing I didn't have was family support. My mom would call once every few months, not to check in, but to ask if I could lend her money for something. A bill. A car repair. Groceries. My dad never called. When I tried to share good news, my first big client, my first office space, my first hire, they brushed it off. "That's nice, honey," Mom would say, distracted. "Did you hear Ryan might be getting a promotion?" I stopped telling them anything. Then came my 36th birthday. I had just landed a contract with a Fortune 500 client. The kind of deal that made the sleepless nights worth it. But when I looked around my empty apartment that night, I felt hollow. I decided to treat myself to dinner at a quiet little cafe near the office. I sat alone, ordered my favorite dessert, and when the waitress brought out that cupcake with a candle, I almost laughed. She said, "Make a wish," and for the first time in years, I did. I wished that someday, my life would matter enough that people would notice when I wasn't there. It was poetic, in a sad kind of way. 12 years later, I got my wish. The article dropped on a Wednesday morning. Self-made CEO turns bedroom startup into $75 million tech empire. My inbox exploded. Reporters, investors, old classmates, exes. My phone buzzed for hours. But the biggest shock wasn't the media. It was the caller ID that popped up on my screen that afternoon, Mom. I stared at it for a full minute before answering. "Oh my God, sweetheart," she gushed. "We saw the article. We're so proud of you. Your father and I were just saying we should have believed in you all along." There was a pause, one of those pauses where you can almost hear the gears turning before the ask comes. "So," she continued, "we were thinking, maybe we could come by? Celebrate properly? It's been too long." I said yes. I don't know why. Maybe morbid curiosity. Maybe I wanted to see what 20 years of absence looks like when it's dressed up in fake affection. They showed up that Saturday, flowers, cake, even balloons. Chloe and Ryan came too, both acting like we were the Brady Bunch. I smiled, hugged them, played along. Until my dad sat down, looked around my apartment, and said, "So, now that you're doing well, maybe we could talk about some kind of arrangement. You know, for all the years we supported you." I laughed. Out loud. I thought he was joking. He wasn't. That's when the real story began. Because if there's one thing I've learned from building something out of nothing, it's that people who ignored you on the way up will always feel entitled to what you earned once you've made it. And this time I wasn't going to let them take a damn thing. My parents sat on my leather couch like they owned the place, sipping wine I bought, eating cake I paid for, and talking like the last 20 years hadn't been radio silence. Ryan was scrolling through his phone, half listening. Chloe was fake smiling, complimenting everything in sight, my view, my rug, even my dog. And my mom, bless her manipulative heart, was running her fingers over the marble countertop like she'd earned it. "So," Dad started, clearing his throat. "We were thinking. You're doing well now. And your mother and we've had a rough few years. Mortgage, medical bills, you know how it is. We figured, maybe you could, help out a little. You wouldn't be where you are without us, right?" He said it so casually, like the 20 years of absence were just a misunderstanding. I stared at him, and in that second, something inside me went completely still. I wasn't angry. I wasn't sad. I was cold. "I wouldn't be where I am because of you," I said softly. "Not without you. Not with you. Because of you." They laughed awkwardly, brushing it off. "Oh, come on, honey. Don't be dramatic. We raised you. We worked hard." Worked hard? They couldn't even remember my birthday. That night, after they left, taking half the leftover cake with them, I sat in my office staring at my company's financial dashboard. Numbers didn't lie. People did. I thought about all the nights I'd cried alone, all the milestones I celebrated with no one. The idea started forming slowly, like smoke curling through a keyhole. A plan. Not the kind of revenge you post online. The kind that doesn't look like revenge at all, until it's too late. A week later, I invited them to lunch. I told them I had something big to discuss. They came dressed like they were meeting investors. My dad even wore cologne I bought him when I was 18, a gift he'd never thanked me for. "I've been thinking about what you said," I told them. "You're right. You did raise me. And you deserve something for that." Mom's eyes lit up like she'd just hit the jackpot. "Oh, sweetheart, we don't expect anything. Please," I cut in, "don't be modest. I've got something better than money." I handed them each an envelope. Inside was a glossy brochure with the logo of a brand new company, Eclipse Wellness, a full-service senior lifestyle brand. They looked confused. "What's this?" "It's your new home," I said, smiling. "I'm launching a chain of high-end retirement communities. You'll be the first residents of the pilot program." Mom's smile faltered. "You want to put us in a home?" "Not a home," I corrected sweetly. A luxury experience. You'll get private suites, gourmet meals, medical care, everything. And the best part? It's all under your name. I'll even brand the first location after you too, the Caldwell Retreat. They looked at each other. My dad frowned. That sounds expensive. Oh, it is, I said. But don't worry, I'll cover everything. I'll just need one thing from you. Their greed perked right back up. What's that? Power of attorney, I said casually. It's standard. For medical and financial management. Just to make sure you're taken care of properly. The silence that followed was delicious. Mom finally spoke. Honey. I don't know about signing something like that. I leaned back and smiled. Then you can manage on your own. But I thought you said you needed help. It was cruel, maybe. But it was honest. They'd raised me on emotional starvation, and now they wanted to feast. I wasn't feeding them anymore. A week later, I got a call from my brother. You really scared them, he said. They think you're trying to trap them. I laughed. Oh, I'm not trying to trap them, Ryan. I'm giving them exactly what they asked for, help. They just don't like the strings attached. He was quiet for a second. You've changed. No, I said. I finally learned the difference between family and obligation. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine, sat by the window, and watched the city lights flicker like sparks of all the pain I'd burned into fuel. They wanted to guilt me for every birthday they missed, every year they forgot I existed. Now, they'd remember me every single day, when the invitations, the contracts, and the headlines started rolling out. Because I wasn't done. Not yet. This was just the beginning of their education. When I first told Ryan and Chloe about the pilot program, their faces lit up like I'd handed them the map to a secret treasure chest. That glow didn't feel like gratitude. It felt like anticipation, the way predators look at prey before they pounce. I could run the accounts, Ryan said, practically drooling. I'm great with numbers. I could manage the books. You know, keep everything tidy. He said it casual, like offering to help a friend move a couch. He'd never balanced anyone's checkbook in his life, but the word manage made his voice slick with opportunity. Chloe, on the other hand, immediately started imagining the lifestyle shoots. We should brand the opening, she said. Influencers, canapes, a ribbon cutting with a florist backdrop. Mom would love posing with that plaque. She ran her fingers through her hair and looked at me as if she'd been born to be my PR director. They wanted roles in my project, chairs, consulting fees, exposure. They wanted proximity to my success. Their timing was predictably awful, but I was prepared to let their own flaws run the show. I called for a family meeting under the guise of finalizing paperwork. They came, dressed in the way people dress when they expect a party and a payoff. Mom clutched the glossy brochure like a talisman. I sat at the head of the table, the CEO not only of my company but of the life I'd stitched together one sleepless night at a time. My lawyers were on standby. My accountant had already drafted contracts. I'd prepared for every variant of entitlement. What I hadn't expected was how quickly their bravado would crack under the thing they feared most, being made public. You'll have titles, I said, deliberately generous. Honorary board positions during the pilot. Ryan, Director of Community Operations. Chloe, Creative Liaison. They smiled with the stupid, hungry grin of people who think a title confers competence. Ryan swallowed his pride the second he touched the first contract and saw the clause I'd placed where his name would have had access to actual funds. This just gives me oversight, he said, trying to sound important. He didn't read the small print that said oversight required quarterly reporting, public disclosures, and outside audits. Chloe's contract contained an even nastier surprise, a mandatory non-disparagement clause and a moratorium on social media posts related to the company for 2 years. She who lives for the feed could not post about her petunias without violating a legally binding agreement. I watched her face fall when she realized she couldn't monetize this easy. They signed anyway. Greed always signs without reading. Within 3 weeks, their true colors began to show. Ryan, who prided himself on being the family fixer, tried to slip a slew of personal invoices through the company's expense portal: car repairs, a consulting fee for a buddy, even a charged weekend retreat labeled retreat research. The accounting team flagged it and forwarded it to me. I called him into my office and we had a conversation where I said, calmly, "You're not going to steal from the pilot." He sputtered, then begged. "It's not stealing, just an advance. We'll put it back." His voice had that childish, entitled edge I remembered from debt collectors and high school parking tickets. I froze the accounts for the pilot and reported the attempted fraud to our compliance officer. That report triggered an internal review, one that would be publicly documented when the pilot's audits rolled out. Chloe tried a softer strategy. She started leaking curated behind-the-scenes images to an influencer who still used the town we grew up in as nostalgic #fuel. She wanted the optics, her holding a champagne flute next to mom on a charity tablecloth. Instead, the influencer, curious, dug into the background. He found, within minutes, a decade-old social media thread where Chloe had mocked a local eldercare facility for being so depressing. The screenshots resurfaced in a feed that moved faster than any PR team could scrub. The comment section did not forgive. I watched both of them unravel the way you watch a poorly made souffle collapse, slowly, humiliatingly, loudly. Ryan's attempted invoice padding was escalated and summarized in a board package that made its way to the family's email chains. Chloe's leaked images turned into a viral thread of hypocrisy that cost her 3 small brand collaborations overnight. Mom called me crying. Not because of what her children had done, but because she'd misjudged the consequences. "I didn't mean," she whispered. "I just wanted us to be together." That was the part that hurt. They all had imagined my success as a banquet they were invited to by default. None of them had planned to earn a seat. They thought affection could be purchased with a slice of cake. The media vulture smelled blood. A local reporter called with a sympathetic-sounding question about family involvement in startups. I gave a measured, professional answer. Family members participating in pilot programs should be subject to the same governance and transparency as any other stakeholder. I watched as the piece landed online, and the headline made my stomach churn: "Self-made founder's family ties tested in $75 million pilot." The backlash wasn't immediate, karma rarely is, but it was precise. Ryan's accounting firm called him in for a review after one of their partners saw the board summary. Chloe found her DMs flooded with angry messages and several companies rescinded product collaborations citing reputational risk. Mom and Dad's "what we did for her" narrative turned into a subplot about entitlement. What surprised me was not their downfall, but the way they clawed at each other as the pressure built. Ryan blamed Chloe for exposing family secrets through her posts. Chloe accused Ryan of being lazy and petty. Mom alternated between pleading for peace and strategizing how to make the narrative about forgiveness. Dad mostly stayed quiet, the old man who once shrugged off my wins now staring at the dinner table like it had betrayed him. When the pilot's legal team recommended suspending family members from operational roles pending audit, the family imploded. Ryan called me a control freak. Chloe called me cruel. Mom cried about ingratitude. Father said, in a voice I'd never heard before, small, defenseless, "We didn't know how to be better." I didn't know how to answer that. Part of me wanted to say, "You had 20 years to learn." Another part wanted to reach across the table and hold my mother's hand and tell her that people can change. But I also knew that change demanded consequences. You can't turn absence into presence with a cake and a press release. So I did what I'd always done. I acted with the cool, boring ferocity of someone who understands systems. I let the governance policies run. I let audits do their work. I let the legal documents I'd written, precise, immovable, and cold, untangle the emotional mess into outcomes. That's how the world I built runs, on rules, not feelings. They lost access to roles. Ryan faced disciplinary review. Chloe's brand deals evaporated. Mom and Dad were moved gently out of the pilot's decision-making circle and into the residency program I'd paid for, complete with complimentary services and privacy protections. They loved telling people it was for their comfort. They were comfortable being taken care of without the mess of power. Watching them shrink from architects of entitlement into sidelined beneficiaries was both a relief and a grief. I had not wanted to hurt them. I had wanted them to be present. But you can't negotiate presence when people extract value without investment. When the dust settled, they sat in my living room one Sunday evening, quieter than they'd ever been. Chloe fiddled with a napkin. Ryan stared at his shoes. Mom looked at me with something like shame and hope tangled together. "I'm sorry," Mom said. "We thought we deserved," her voice broke. For a second, being the woman who'd built a $75 million company felt less like a victory and more like a battleground where the trophies were people's lives. I wanted to accept her apology because I wanted a normal life. But the ledger of 20 years of absence sat between us, each missed birthday a line item. "It's too late to undo everything," I said honestly. "But it's not too late to do better. That starts with you all telling the truth when people ask, and not trying to profit off my work." My voice was steady. "And it starts with you learning what it means to be helpful without expecting a return." No one cheered. No one hugged. But later that night, Chloe sent me a text, "I'll take down the posts." Ryan blocked the partner he'd been trying to funnel money to. Progress, however slow, felt like a small victory. I don't think any of us left that house the same. They had to reckon with their reflection, and I had to reckon with the fact that justice and mercy often live in the same zip code but rarely in the same house. The war wasn't over. It had simply shifted from the public spectacle to the quiet, harder work of fixing what had been broken. And if the rest of the story taught me anything, it was this: revenge is not always a thunderbolt. Sometimes it's a series of small, deliberate acts that force people to see themselves. After the family meeting, the quiet that followed wasn't peace, it was tension with a heartbeat. My phone stopped buzzing with their constant calls, but every silence felt like the pause before another explosion. I thought maybe, just maybe, we'd reached a fragile truce. I was wrong. 3 weeks later, my assistant forwarded me an email with the subject line, "Urgent Inquiry, Family Statement Request." Attached was a draft article from a tabloid-style business magazine, one that thrived on drama and downfall. The headline read, "Self-made CEO accused of exploiting parents for profit." My stomach dropped. The article quoted anonymous family sources, which anyone with a pulse could identify as Ryan or Chloe, claiming I'd manipulated our parents into signing legal documents they didn't understand to take control of their assets. It was a full-blown smear campaign. At first, I just stared at the screen. My name in bold letters, my company's reputation tangled in emotional garbage. Then the anger came, hot and clean. After everything, the money, the housing, the chances, they still found a way to twist it into something ugly. So I made a decision. If they wanted a story, I'd give them one they'd never forget. I called a family meeting at my parents' new apartment, the luxury retreat they loved bragging about. The irony was almost poetic. They were sipping champagne in a home I'd bought, while accusing me of using them. When I walked in, the air was thick with fake civility. Mom was nervously rearranging flowers, Chloe sat with her phone on record, subtle as always, and Ryan looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. "So," I said, setting my bag down, "you've been busy." No one spoke. "You know," I continued, "it's funny. For people who say they want to stay out of the spotlight, you sure know how to chase it." Chloe looked offended. "We didn't mean for that to go public. We were just talking to someone." "Right," I said. "Talking. With quotes. And fabricated claims. You realize defamation laws exist, right?" Ryan scoffed. "Come on, you're not gonna sue your own family." That was the moment I smiled, the kind of smile that made even Ryan sit back in his chair. "You think this is about lawsuits?" "No, Ryan. This is about consequences. The kind you can't pay your way out of. Over the next week, I went to work. I didn't scream. I didn't post. I did what I do best, I built systems. My PR team drafted a professional, emotionless press release. We are aware of recent claims made by individuals with personal ties to our founder. These claims are unfounded and currently under internal review. Luna Digital remains committed to transparency and ethical practice. No gossip. No shade. Just corporate precision. Then I made one small, deliberate move. I publicly announced a new charitable foundation, the Luna Initiative, dedicated to funding scholarships for women in tech who came from difficult or unsupportive family backgrounds. The internet loved it. The same day the magazine tried to smear me, my name trended under #LunaGivesBack. And my favorite part? The foundation's first major donors weren't strangers, they were companies who'd worked with me for years, people who actually knew my story. The more the truth spread, the smaller my family's lies became. But inside that victory, something shifted. One night, I got a call from Mom. She sounded tired, older, even. "We didn't mean to hurt you," she said softly. "Ryan thought, maybe if people felt sorry for us, they'd pressure you to share more. We just wanted to feel included." I didn't know what to say. It was like hearing a stranger speak through my mother's voice. "Mom," I said finally, "I gave you inclusion. I gave you a home. I gave you protection. What else could you possibly want?" There was a long pause. Then she whispered, "You." For the first time in years, my throat went tight. They wanted me. The daughter they'd ignored. The one they'd only noticed once she was worth something. And part of me, the child still waiting for someone to light her birthday candles, wanted to give in. But then I remembered every voicemail left unanswered, every birthday spent alone, every time I begged for attention that never came. "No," I said softly. "You don't get me. Not anymore." She started to cry. And I hung up. The next morning, I sent her flowers, the same kind I used to deliver to her doorstep as a teenager, the ones she never thanked me for. The card said, "For everything we could have been. L." I didn't send them out of cruelty. I sent them as closure. That day, I realized revenge wasn't always about making someone pay. Sometimes, it was about proving you could walk away without needing their apology. Still, part of me couldn't shake the ache of it all. The hollow kind. The kind that success doesn't fill. I looked around my office, the awards, the headlines, the glass walls overlooking the city, and felt that same quiet I'd known since childhood. I built an empire to prove I was worth loving. But the truth was simpler and sadder than that. I'd never learned how to be loved without earning it. And maybe, that was the real revenge. Because they'd never get another piece of me. Not my money. Not my guilt. Not my silence. They'd have to live knowing they'd created something powerful, and lost it forever. After the storm passed, the quiet felt different. It wasn't the brittle silence of anger, it was heavier, full of questions I'd never let myself ask while I was busy surviving. For the first time in years, the alerts on my phone weren't about contracts, meetings, or headlines, they were reminders to breathe, to drink water, to eat something that didn't come out of a cardboard box. I'd built my whole world around being untouchable. Now, with the fight against my family finished, there was no one left to defy but the person in the mirror. That was when the email came. Subject, "Long time no see, remember me?" From Ethan Brooks. I froze. Ethan had been my first boss at the tiny design firm where I'd interned before launching Luna Digital. Back then, I'd been a 23-year-old kid with thrift store blazers and more drive than sense. Ethan was the one who'd taught me how to pitch, how to say we instead of I, and how to stand my ground without apologizing for it. He was also the first person who noticed when I was living out of my car. He'd left coffee on my desk every morning and pretended not to see the dark circles under my eyes. Now, 12 years later, he wanted to catch up. We met at a small café downtown, the kind that still brewed coffee by hand and smelled like burnt sugar. He looked older, gray at the temples, laugh lines deeper, but his eyes were exactly the same, kind, observant, patient. "Luna Digital," he said with a grin, sliding a newspaper across the table. My face stared back from the business section. "You always said you'd build something big. Guess you weren't kidding." I laughed, but it came out thin. "Yeah, I just didn't expect the family drama expansion pack." He chuckled softly. "I read about that too." "You okay?" The question hit harder than it should have. No one had asked me that in years, at least not without a camera or an agenda attached. "I'm fine," I lied automatically. He didn't call me out on it. He just leaned back, studying me the way he used to when I was debugging code. "You know, success can look a lot like survival if you don't slow down." For a moment, I didn't answer. Then I admitted quietly, "I don't really know who I am without the fight." Over the next few weeks, Ethan and I started talking again. Lunch turned into coffee, coffee into long walks by the river after work. He never pushed. He just listened, and in the space he gave me, I started hearing things I'd buried years ago, my own laughter, my own exhaustion, my own heartbeats that weren't tied to deadlines. One night, we sat on a bench overlooking the water. City lights flickered across the surface like 1,000 small truths. "You ever think about what drove you?" he asked. "Proving them wrong," I said. "Every single one of them." "And did it work?" I thought about my parents' empty apologies, my siblings' silence, the house full of trophies that no one shared with me. "It worked too well," I said finally. "Now I don't know how to stop." Ethan smiled, not pitying, just knowing. "Then maybe it's time to start proving something for yourself instead of against them." That night, I went home and opened the box I hadn't touched in years. Inside were scraps from the life I'd escaped, a faded birthday card from a high school friend, an old thumb drive with my first website, and a Polaroid of me at 24, grinning with a cup of diner coffee and ink on my hands. I barely recognized the girl in the picture. She looked hungry for life, not revenge. For the first time, I wanted to find her again. The next morning, I did something radical. I took a day off. No emails, no calls, no urgent anything. I drove back to my hometown. The streets hadn't changed much, same gas station, same diner, same church steeple cutting into the sky. But the air felt lighter. I parked outside that old diner where I'd worked double shifts while coding at night. The owner, Mrs. Henderson, was still there, now with silver hair and slower steps. "Well, I'll be," she said, squinting at me. "If it isn't little Lila Caldwell. I saw you on the news." She hugged me before I could react, and for a second I forgot to be the CEO. I was just Lila again, the girl who'd scraped tips into a jar labeled Dream Fund. "I never forgot you," she said softly. "You told me once you were gonna build something that would make people remember your name." "Guess you did." I smiled, blinking back tears. "Yeah, but I think I forgot myself in the process." She patted my cheek. "Then find your way back, sweetheart. You've got time." Driving home that night, the sun was setting behind the highway, bleeding orange across the sky. I rolled the window down and let the wind tangle my hair like it used to. For the first time in years, I felt something that wasn't pride or pain, it was peace. I didn't need to prove anything anymore. I didn't need to earn love like a paycheck. Maybe forgiveness wasn't about them at all. Maybe it was about me learning to exist without the constant need to win. Ethan texted as I pulled into my driveway. "Dinner tomorrow?" "No business talk. Just food and bad jokes." I smiled. "Deal." That night, I stood on my balcony with a glass of wine, staring at the city that had once symbolized everything I fought for. Below me, lights pulsed like tiny heartbeats. I thought about the waitress who'd lit my birthday candle 12 years ago, about the little girl who'd wanted someone to show up. And I whispered to her, "I'm here now." For the first time in my life, that was enough. The invitation came from a women in business conference I'd turned down for years. They wanted me to deliver the keynote, Building Yourself from Nothing. Normally, I'd have sent a polite decline. I didn't like microphones or stages, I liked being the quiet force behind the brand. But this time, something tugged at me. Maybe it was Ethan's words echoing in my head, or the way Mrs. Henderson had hugged me like I was still the girl with the dream fund jar. For once, I didn't want to hide behind Luna Digital. I wanted to speak as Lila Caldwell. The morning of the conference, I stood backstage, palms damp, heart steady in that way fear becomes clarity. The audience was full, executives, founders, students. I spotted a few familiar faces, people who'd doubted me, people who'd dismissed me, people who'd once called me lucky. When the announcer said my name, the applause was thunderous. I walked onto the stage in a simple black suit, not designer, just clean and sharp. No armor. Just me. "Good morning," I said into the mic, and my voice carried in a way it never had before. "I'm not here to talk about numbers or strategies. I'm here to talk about the days when no one showed up." The crowd quieted. I built my first website at 14. My parents thought it was cute. My teacher said I was distracted. My friends stopped calling when I started working nights. And on my 36th birthday, I sat alone in a café with a cupcake and a candle, and a stranger told me to make a wish. A small ripple of laughter broke the tension. I smiled. I wished that someone would remember me. I paused, letting it hang. 12 years later, people know my name. But the truth is, recognition doesn't heal loneliness. Success doesn't erase scars. What heals is choosing to show up for yourself, even when no one else does. There were tears in the audience. I could see them, women nodding, men looking down, young girls gripping notebooks like lifelines. I used to think revenge was about making people regret underestimating you, I continued. Now I know it's about building a life they can't take credit for. The applause was soft at first, then grew, wave after wave until the sound was a pulse under my feet. And in that moment, I realized something profound, I wasn't speaking for them. I was speaking for the woman I'd been, the one who thought she had to earn love by building empires. After the speech, people lined up to shake my hand, ask questions, take photos. But one figure lingered near the back, hesitant. My mother. I froze for a moment when I saw her. She looked smaller, softer, like time had finally caught up. "Hi, sweetheart," she said quietly. I didn't know she'd come. I didn't even know how she'd found out. I just wanted to say. "I was wrong," she said. "About so many things." I studied her face, the wrinkles I hadn't noticed forming, the tired eyes, the trembling hands. She wasn't the villain I'd built in my head. She was a woman who'd been too afraid to be proud of her daughter until the world told her it was safe. And in that moment, I realized forgiveness didn't mean forgetting. It meant no longer letting the pain define you. "I know," I said softly. "I'm not angry anymore." She started crying, and I stepped forward, not to fix her, not to console her, but to end it. I hugged her. For both of us. That night, the conference hosted a private dinner. I sat on the balcony afterward, overlooking the city. Ethan joined me, 2 glasses of champagne in hand. "To peace," he said, raising his glass. "To peace," I echoed, clinking mine against his. Below us, the skyline shimmered like a heartbeat, steady, alive, endless. I thought about all the versions of me that had existed, the invisible daughter, the lonely dreamer, the furious entrepreneur. They'd all led to this one, not perfect, but whole. For the first time, I didn't want revenge. I wanted grace. Before bed, I pulled out a small box from my desk drawer. Inside was a single cupcake and a candle, a tradition I'd quietly kept all these years. I lit the candle and watched the flame flicker, soft and gold. "Make a wish," I whispered to myself. And I did. I wished that somewhere, someone sitting alone with a cupcake would know they weren't forgotten, that even if no one showed up for them, they could still show up for themselves. Then I blew the candle out. And in the darkness that followed, I felt light. What was your favorite moment? Drop it in the comments below. Don't miss more thrilling stories like this. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload.